Welcome to Dormiveglia, the space between waking and sleep where science meets stillness. We are glad you're here. For most of human history, waking at 3 in the morning was not a problem. It was expected. It was, in a very real sense, the plan. Before artificial light transformed the night into a version of day, people in most parts of the world slept in 2 separate periods, divided by an hour or 2 of quiet wakefulness. The first sleep would begin not long after darkness fell, earlier than most people go to bed today. Then, several hours later, in the deep middle of the night, there would be a natural waking. People would rise, sometimes briefly. They would pray, or think, or talk quietly with a companion, or simply lie in the dark in a state of gentle, restful awareness. Then, a second sleep would follow, carrying them through to morning. Historical records from before artificial light, diaries, court documents, medical texts, describe this 2-sleep pattern as a normal feature of the night, unremarkable and apparently comfortable. Writers called the 2 periods by different names: the first sleep and the second sleep, the first slumber and the morning sleep. The waking hour between them was described as a time of particular peace and clarity, the night's quiet middle. What changed everything was light. When gaslight arrived in the early 19th century and electric light followed, the night became available in a way it never had been before. People could extend their evenings, work hours shifted, the social organization of the day changed, and gradually, the 2-sleep pattern that had governed human rest for most of recorded history was replaced by the single consolidated block of sleep we now consider normal. A block that requires people to stay awake until a much later hour than their biology prefers, in order to accumulate enough tiredness to sleep through the night in one stretch. The result is that a significant proportion of people now wake at 2, 3, or 4 in the morning, precisely in the gap that was, for most of human history, the natural waking hour between their first and second sleep. And instead of lying quietly in the dark, trusting the biological rhythm they are in, they panic. They check the time. They calculate how many hours of sleep they have lost. They lie rigid with the effort of forcing themselves back under. The 3 o'clock waking is not a malfunction. It is an echo. Here is what is happening in your body when you wake at 3 in the morning. Sleep in the second half of the night has a different character than sleep in the first half. The deep, physically restorative stages of sleep, the ones that rebuild tissue, consolidate the immune system, and restore the body's energy systems, are concentrated in the earlier part of the night. The second half belongs more to the lighter, more psychologically active stages of sleep, including the longer and more emotionally complex dreams that REM produces as the night progresses. It is also in the second half of the night that your body begins an early preparation for waking. Long before your alarm is set to sound, sometimes 3 or 4 hours before, your brain begins to produce cortisol. Cortisol is a hormone associated with alertness and the mobilization of the body's resources. During the day, it rises in the morning and falls through the afternoon. But the process of generating the morning cortisol rise does not wait for dawn. It begins in the dark, hours before first light, as your biology begins the slow work of preparing you for the day. By the time you actually wake, cortisol is already well on its way up. This is by design. It is part of what makes you feel able to face the day rather than lying in an incapacitated heap when the alarm goes off. But this process means that your sleep in the second half of the night is physiologically lighter, more easily interrupted, and more prone to full waking than the sleep that came before it. The deep anchor of the first hours of sleep has already served its purpose. The body is on its way back up toward alertness. And the natural sensitivity of this phase means that a thought, a sound, a shift in temperature, or simply the completion of a sleep cycle can bring you fully awake. This is why 3 in the morning feels different from waking at midnight. At midnight, if you wake, you are likely still in the gravitational pull of deep early night sleep, and returning to it feels natural and easy. At 3, you are already in the body's rising tide. The pull back toward sleep is weaker. The pull toward consciousness is stronger. The thoughts that arrive at 3 in the morning also feel different, more urgent, more negative, more vivid than the same thoughts would feel at 9 in the evening. This is not imagination. The combination of the rising cortisol, the lighter sleep stage, and the darkness of the room creates a neurological context in which the brain's threat detection systems are more active and the moderating influence of the calm, rational prefrontal cortex is reduced. The emotional mind is more exposed at 3 in the morning than it is at almost any other hour. The thing you are worrying about at 3 in the morning is not necessarily worse than it is at other times. It is simply arriving in a state that is chemically designed to make it feel larger. Here is the first tool, and it is the simplest one in this entire series. Stop treating the 3 o'clock waking as an emergency. The effort of trying to force yourself back to sleep, the rigid stillness, the clock checking, the mental arithmetic of sleep debt, the growing frustration as the minutes pass and unconsciousness refuses to arrive. This effort is precisely what keeps you awake. Sleep cannot be commanded. It arrives when the body and mind relax enough to let it come. And lying in bed with your nervous system activated by the urgency of needing to sleep is the opposite of the conditions sleep requires. What the pre-industrial 2-sleep model offers is not nostalgia. It offers permission. Permission to be awake in the middle of the night without treating that waking as a failure. If you wake at 3, you have likely already completed one substantial sleep cycle or more. You are not starting from behind. You are in the natural middle of a rhythm that your body understands. When you feel the 3 o'clock waking arrive, try this. Do not check the time. Do not calculate. Instead, lie still and notice what is actually there. The weight of the body in the bed, the temperature of the room, the quality of the dark. You are not failing to sleep. You are in the middle of the night. You are exactly where you should be. If the waking persists and the mind begins to run with urgency, get up briefly, not to scroll, not to work, not to begin the day. Simply to move to another room, sit quietly for 15 or 20 minutes, and allow the cortisol wave to crest and begin to fall. Then return to bed. The second sleep is still available. It is waiting for you. Here is the second tool, one that addresses what you do with light in those waking hours and why it matters far more than most people realize. When you wake in the night and reach for your phone to check the time or to distract yourself from the thoughts that are arriving, you are doing something that your body reads as a signal that morning has come. The screen light, bright, close, and rich in the short wavelengths that your brain's light-sensitive systems respond to, tells the cortisol system that the day has arrived. The rising tide accelerates. The possibility of returning to sleep recedes. The same applies to switching on a lamp, turning on the television, or going to a brightly lit kitchen. Any significant light at 3 in the morning tells your biology that the night is over. The practical instruction is simple, but requires some intention. Prepare your environment in advance for the possibility of a middle-of-the-night waking. Keep the light in the room or nearby at the very lowest level. A dim, warm night light in the hall, not a bright overhead. If you need to move through the house, use only the lowest possible light. If you want to check the time, use an analog clock or a watch rather than a screen. Do not turn on your phone. If you are someone who wakes regularly at 3, consider keeping a small notebook by the bed. Not to write at length, but simply to offload whatever the mind is carrying. 2 or 3 sentences, enough to signal that the thought has been registered and does not need to keep repeating. The act of writing something down often quiets the loop because the brain can release the need to remember it. The 3 o'clock hour does not need to be defeated. It simply needs to be met without escalation. Hold the dark a little longer. The morning will still come. Thank you for spending this time with us. If Dormiveglia feels like home, subscribe and bring someone with you. Good sleep is worth sharing.